Alright, for those of you who don't know, for Austen in August I've been doing a read-along of Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. So today's video is going to be a response to the discussion questions that I've posted about the book throughout Austen in August. On the blog, I split the discussion questions into two sets, one set for volume 1 and one set for volume 2. Because it is a discussion of the whole book and there are a lot of questions, this might be a little bit of a longer one, just to warn you. A lot of the questions are kind of long and multiple parters, so I don't want to put them on the screen because it'll take up all of the screen, but they're all listed below if you want to see what they are, and I'm going to just kind of pick and choose the things that I want to talk about and not answer absolutely every part of it because that would be an endless video. First impressions and general impressions of the book. I'm not lying when I say that this has always been one of my favorite Austen novels. It tends to be tied for last in most people's kind of estimation with Mansfield Park. People really hate on Mansfield Park, which we read last year, and people really hate on Northanger Abbey. And that makes me sad. I can kind of see why they do. It's maybe not as highbrow or as fully developed as some of Austen's other books, not as layered. It's not that it's not developed, but it's not as layered. But for me, it seems like Austen at her most fun. I feel like I get the most of an impression of who she was and what it would be like to spend time with her through this one. It's very witty and biting and sarcastic, and I've said a lot of times that when I read this one, it's almost like you can feel Austen smiling in some of the lines. Like I can just picture her at her writing desk, just so pleased with herself. So it's always appealed to me from that aspect, but I also just think it's a lot of fun. I like how it's a little bit of satire, which isn't necessarily present in the other Austen novels. It kind of reflects the early writings because she did that a lot in her juvenilia, and you get that right from the very beginning. So Northanger Abbey is kind of set up as a parody of the Gothic novel, and there are a lot of cliches and tropes that we still are familiar with today from stories of Austen's time. They've become even bigger cliches and even bigger standards now. The beautiful heroine and the damsel in distress and everything being over the top and all of that, that's something that Austen was noticing. So the very setup of the book is all about how the main character doesn't fit that Gothic novel mold. She kind of runs down everything about Catherine Morland and how you would never think she's just such an unassuming person. Nothing exciting is going to happen to her. She can't really carry a story. And it's just hilarious. She's just kind of setting up all of those expectations and then immediately subverting them, and it's just delightful to me. Sort of touching on what I already mentioned, which was that it's an openly sarcastic book a lot of the time. There are two things that really just kind of amuse me, and they're both famous scenes in Austen in general, not just this book. One is the line, "Friendship is certainly the finest balm for the pangs of disappointed love." That's quoted a lot. I've seen it in cards, I've seen it on quote lists. It's something that's used a lot and used in earnest. And I guess I had forgotten that it was from Northanger Abbey, so when I was rereading it this time, it kind of cracked me up because I don't think there could be a more sarcastic, ironic line in the entire novel. Both the friendship and the love that are referenced in this line are less than 24 hours old. There's not a disappointed love yet, and there's really not a steadfast friendship yet, and it's just kind of playing with how quickly young girls bond and suddenly they're BFFs forever, and clearly nothing has changed in the couple hundred years since the book was written, because that's still true. I mean, teen girls meet, they gel, and they're thick as thieves until they actually get to know each other, and then it may last or it may not. And so Austen was kind of playing with that, and the idea that it has become this sort of standard line just really amuses me. And the same is true of when Austen sort of breaks the fourth wall and addresses the reader about the idea of novelists and novel readers hating on the novel. Still something that happens today. So there's this whole big section where Austen pretty much goes off on a tangent, cuts off in the middle of what's going on to address the idea of people who look down on the novel and, oh, it's just a novel. Let me actually find that part for you. So Austen says, "Although our productions, novels, have afforded more extensive and unaffected pleasure than those of any other literary corporation in the world, no species of composition has been so much derided. From pride, ignorance, or fashion, our foes are almost as many as our readers." And then after a little bit, there's the quote of people saying, oh, it's only a novel. And then she says, it's only a novel, it's only, and then she lists some famous novels from her time, and then says, in short, only some work in which the greatest powers of the mind are displayed, in which the most thorough knowledge of human nature, the happiest delineation of its varieties, the liveliest effusions of wit and humor are conveyed to the world in the best chosen language. It's only that. So clearly a little bit of a sore spot with Austen, and I find it really funny because this still happens. We still have people that say, oh, it's only YA, it's only a romance novel, it's only sci-fi, whatever it is, completely just brushing away all of the art and the purposefulness and the hard work that goes into it, with the idea that just because something is entertaining, that it must not have any real value. It's only entertainment. There's nothing edifying in it. And I mean, this is something, it's just this elitist stance that we still see. This is really, really common, and probably even some of us have done it, dismissing whatever it is that we think below us, or that we want people to think we think are below us, even if it's a guilty pleasure. That whole thing has always amused me, and I like this sort of passion that comes through there. But then there's this other layer of the fact that Austen herself is writing a parody of a very particular type of novel. She herself is making fun of the things that she says we too easily dismiss. I just kind of love that. That's always amused me. One of the next questions I asked, and one of the things I found most fascinating this time rereading it, because I've read this book a lot, was the idea that Catherine, who we kind of think of as this really naive, easily led character, is a little bit of a very human contradiction. So she's young, she's only 17, she gets led around very easily, she doesn't always get her way in things, and she does kind of let people bully her into things a little bit, but at the same time, she also can be very forceful, and she does stand up for herself and speak her mind, and I don't think I realized quite to the extent that she does it until this reread. And I'm going to kind of tie this into the next question, which is that some people kind of consider her relationship with Henry doomed and think that he's condescending or that he is kind of rude to her in his mockery. For someone so young and for someone who hasn't really been much out in the world, Catherine, as Lady Catherine from Pride and Prejudice would say, gives her opinion very decidedly for one so young. She has a strong moral compass, and if she disagrees with something, she will speak up. If she thinks someone's taking advantage of her, she actually does speak up. Now, she won't fight about it, so if they kind of persist, she might give way and go along and then be a little irritated after the fact. But I'm amazed by how forceful she can be and how assertive she can be, because I forget that. I tend to just think of her as that naive young girl who thinks she's in a Gothic novel, and not as the strong and opinionated woman that she's clearly becoming. So I find that really fascinating, and I think that that ties in with Henry's sort of gentle mockery of her. Henry Tilney kind of mocks everything. He's a very sarcastic but delivers in a deadpan kind of way. He reminds me a little bit of Stephen Colbert on the Colbert Report, presenting things very seriously when he's actually being completely facetious. So you pretty much have to take everything Henry says with a grain of salt. Some people feel like from the things he says, which can be very mocking and kind of derisive and even almost anti-woman, they feel like he is going to be really mean to Catherine or condescending to her and kind of make her life miserable, or that he's going to lose interest in her and that she's just a pretty young plaything, and that once he's lost interest, he will be downright cruel. I don't see that at all personally. I guess I can see where they're coming from, but I've always interpreted Henry as being someone who's just full of it in a fun, silly way. When you first meeting him, you might take him seriously, in which case you'll probably be offended. Once you get to know him, you realize nothing he ever says is serious, and then you can kind of laugh at it. I think maybe I interpret it this way because I myself do this quite a bit. I will say some ridiculous things and be just totally wrong with a smile, always just kind of wink and a nudge thing, just messing with you. And I expect you to do it back, and I think that that's Henry. So I relate to that. And I think that in that scenario, when people are thinking that Henry's going to make Catherine's life miserable, I don't think that they're giving Catherine credit for the woman that she's going to become, because I think she will hold her own against Henry. Right now, she's younger. She hasn't been out in the world. He's charming, he's attractive, he's rich, and she's a little bit in awe of him. once she's more comfortable with him, she is gonna hold her own and she is gonna give him a run for his money. That's what I think. I will say though that reading through it this time and some of the things that Henry says, I started to get a feel of him as a bit of a sassy gay man, you know? I know there are a lot of people who write papers on queer readings of Austen and trying to figure out if any of her characters might actually be gay, which is something interesting to debate because it's not like most people would have been openly homosexual during Austen's time, but she still would have known homosexuals even if she didn't know that they were gay. So those personality traits would definitely work their way in, and she could be writing a gay character without knowing it, or she could be intentionally writing one and just kind of trying to be accurate to whoever they are, whoever she modeled them on. But I've never really kind of read too much into it because I just try to take it at whatever Austen has presented. And I don't want to think of Henry Tilney as a gay man because I love him and I love his relationship with Catherine, and I don't want to think there's not love there. He's a little bit... Some of these lines, man, they remind me a little of Oscar Wilde, who was the sassy gay man. I might just be reading into it too much, but I'm wondering now. If anyone else has ever gotten that impression, definitely let me know. I want to know if I'm alone in this or if you see it. But let's just all pretend at least that it's not true because I need my Tilney feels. And that's pretty much it for the first set of questions and volume 1. The last question was just about anything else you want to bring up. And I've touched on most of what I wanted to talk about. The only other thing is I love how well Austen sets up these characters so that you as the reader know where this is going. You see who's fake and who's not. And you're just kind of waiting for Catherine to see the real side of people. I like that. On to volume 2. Volume 2 is pretty much when all the shit goes down. There are a lot of cute flirtatious moments in volume 1 and getting to know the characters. And then in volume 2 is when things start to change and I'm just waiting for Catherine to kind of catch up and see who these people really are. Catherine begins to understand the people around her a little bit better and see their true selves and decide which direction that she's being pulled in that she actually wants to be pulled in. So she's got the Thorpes on one side, the Tilneys on the other, and she's got to kind of figure out how to follow her heart. And of course there are the infamous, hilarious aspects of Northanger Abbey, which is Catherine visiting the Tilney home, which is a rundown ancient abbey, and thinking that she may have stumbled on a murder plot. And as I say this, I realize why there are so many Jane Austen as a detective type of novels, all the murder mysteries and Sherlockian things. Austen did definitely lay the groundwork for this. I asked people to kind of try to consider all angles of Catherine's visit to the Tilney home. So you have Catherine, who everything she sees she kind of distorts into proof that there's something going on that only she has stumbled upon. She sees everything through a suspicious lens, and it's because she's been reading these Gothic novels and has kind of absorbed them, and now that she's in this setting that fits those novels, she sees them everywhere and feels like she's part of one. And it's hilarious, and we all kind of make fun of her for it. But when you actually stop to look at it, she's a 17-year-old girl away from home with essentially strangers. I mean, yes, she's been kind of hanging out with them while she was on vacation, but think if you had gone on vacation, not with your family, but with your neighbors. You met a brother and sister there. They were nice. You hung out a few times and they were like, oh, do you want to come visit us? And you did. You don't really know them all that well. You're completely out of your depth. There's no one around you that you know. You can't even, it's not like you can pick up the phone and call someone if something goes wrong. You can't order your own carriage and be driven home. I mean, you're stuck. You're there. And that has to kind of build up some anxiety to lay the foundation for you to start misinterpreting everything and being a little freaked out. So that kind of makes it more understandable. But then the things that happen with the fact that General Tilney is General Tilney, he's just kind of seems to be a little bit possibly cruel and dismissive, and maybe like he's hiding something. The family in general maybe feel like they're hiding something. It's probably mostly down to the fact that you're trying to put your best face forward when your brother's potential fiance and your potential new best friend is suddenly in your house. You want to give a good impression, so you're trying to kind of sugarcoat things, and you never want someone to see you and your family at your worst. And it is this sort of, dark, intriguing atmosphere. It's an abbey. All old places seem to be haunted. You know, we have that thing in us as humans that we look at somewhere that so many people have gone before us and we think there has to be something lingering here. And as a 17-year-old girl in this place that might give you the heebie-jeebies a little bit, where everyone seems like they're kind of tiptoeing around things, you might start to wonder, what's going on that side of the abbey? What's going on in these little secret rooms that I'm not allowed to go in or that people act funny about? You combine that with all of the sort of almost horror novels of the time that you've been reading, as many as you can get your hands on, and it starts to kind of come together and build this picture of things that may have been and that you might now find yourself a part of. So I think it's kind of understandable that Catherine reacts the way she does. It's hilarious and you want to just say like, wake up girl, come on. But at the same time, when you find yourself in a vulnerable position as a very young girl, alone in the world, no one to rely on except for these people that are around you that you don't know enough about, your imagination can run away with you and you might not always be wrong. So the older I get, rather than finding Catherine more silly, I actually find her kind of more understandable. I am moderately surprised that it didn't sort of end relationships between Catherine and the Tilneys. I would imagine she's going to take a fair amount of ribbing from this for years to come, but you would kind of think that if the girl you were seeing suspected your father of murdering your mother, that you might be like, she's crazy and I'm just gonna cut that one loose. But no, Henry's amused enough by her and sees where it comes from enough that he's able to kind of just mock her a bit for it and let it go. I also think that this was the sort of final nail in the coffin for Catherine as far as letting go some of that youthful fancy and being a little less a child and a little more of an adult. She's kind of been snapped out of things. I think she's more willing to see people for who they actually are rather than who they present themselves as. So she's been kind of lured by Isabella and her bright, shiny sparkliness. Didn't see how flawed Isabella really was. And now she's seen that, and she's seeing that the facade doesn't always match the interior. And I think it's waking her up, and this was the final kind of culmination of that, to allow her to be more genuinely perceptive and less fanciful. I will kind of miss fanciful Catherine, but I think that this was a big growing experience for her, and, you know, good folly for the rest of us. And of course, as with any Austen book, I will always reread them, and every time I reread them I find something new to kind of ponder or a different perspective to kind of filter things through, and that's what I find so fascinating about Austen. I've talked about it before, there's always something to kind of build on, there's always a new way to look at the characters, and ones that I didn't think I liked, I'll suddenly understand more. Ones that I do like, I'll start to see their flaws more and kind of let go a little bit of my need to protect them and say they're perfect. There's just always something. Even in Austen's shortest, often mocked novel, there's always something else that you didn't see before, or that you didn't see all sides of, or connections that you didn't make, or new understandings that can be gleaned. Just, this is why I do what I do. So that is all for the serious discussion questions. I know it's kind of a bit of a longer one. Before I let you go, the very last question I asked was to pick 3 characters from Northanger Abbey and to do a quick kiss, marry, kill. There's not much surprise in what I'm about to say, and 2 of them were already in the actual Austen kiss, marry, kill video, but Henry Tilney, John Thorpe, and Catherine's brother. Obviously I'm killing John, kissing Catherine's brother, who seems like a nice guy but a little too easily distracted by ooh shiny syndrome, and marrying Tilney. All is right with the world, even if he is a sassy gay man. That's all for this Austen video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and of course there's plenty more Austen stuff going on at Austen in August. You can find the full playlist of Austen related videos here, or you can click on Jane to get to the full schedule for Austen in August. This time she's wearing green. But that's all for now. As always, thanks for watching and happy reading.